Welcome to the Wealth Matters podcast, where investors come together to better understand how to build passive cash flow and create generational wealth without all the confusing mumbo-jumbo. Here's your host and co-author of Amazon #1 bestseller, Alpesh Pamar.
Welcome to Wealth Matters podcast. I am going to talk to someone who is sitting in Ireland right now. His name is Louis O'Connor. He's the founder and principal of Strategic Metals Invest. They are the only industry supplier in the world to offer private investors the option to purchase and profit from owning strategic metals. So we are going to talk about not gold, not silver, not platinum, not palladium, or even stones like diamond. We are going to talk about rare earth metals, which are actually being used in industry. So welcome, Lou. I am looking forward to this episode.
Me too. Thank you so much, Alpesh. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
So we start with this particular question with every guest. Tell us something interesting or funny about yourself.
Okay, so maybe not necessarily interesting about me, but I think I've lived through some interesting times already. I was born in Dublin, 1965. Grew up in Ireland at a time where we had no real economic prosperity. We had, Northern Ireland was still sectarian warfare.
Oh, yes.
And Ireland, this is before technology and stuff took off. So Ireland at the time was just an island in the west of Europe. There was no foreign direct investment. So even though we grew up in what would be considered dark times, life was, that was normal. Like family and love and compassion and stuff, still existed in the community. So looking back now, Ireland is it's got a lot of economic prosperity. All the big tech companies in the world are here.
Right.
But it was just looking back now, you learn, it just goes to show you don't necessarily have to have a lot of material things to be happy. We were still happy families, to me, it tells me it's all about community and family. But what happened then, which I think, what I think makes things interesting is I've lived in a few countries since then, and the first country I went to live in at 19 years of age was West Germany at the time. This is the late 80s, before the wall came down. And that was really interesting too, because you had the Iron Curtain and you had 250,000 US soldiers and you had the British sector. Everything was much like it was since the end of World War II. And you could feel that in the atmosphere, the Russians were just over here, not too far away. And so that was interesting, and I was there when the wall came down. I went to Berlin when the wall came down. Like that day, everybody drove up and saw that reunification, saw what it was like for a country to be separated and divided for, 40 years, East Germany, West Germany. And then I went to Panama, Central America, and I was there when the canal was handed over from the American administration who'd built the canal to the Panamanian administration. So I don't necessarily want to say I'm interesting, but I've certainly lived and witnessed some interesting geopolitical changes.
That's great. So now let's talk about investment. What assets do you invest in personally and why?
Hard assets, property, like agriculture now. I know we're going to talk about rare earths today, but I'm hopefully in about another year from now, I'll be talking to you about an agricultural opportunity that we're 7 or 8 years in the works here testing. But yeah, I like hard assets. I mean, it's sort of what I feel safe in, what I know best. I'm sure there's a lot of other great stuff out there, but I just try to stick to what I'm comfortable with, what I know, and I wouldn't be as well versed, in other asset classes as well. So not that there's anything wrong with them. It's just I wouldn't be as well informed as I'd like to be. So I stick to what I know,
That's so great. And this podcast is all about alternative investments. We don't talk about stocks and options, etc., because we believe in the real assets, right? The assets like agriculture, real estate, or the metals which you can touch and feel, right? That is an inherent value in those. So let's talk about this because you and I already mentioned rare earth metals. What exactly are they?
Right. So they're pretty much, we touch them, see them, feel them every day. The devices we're using right now probably have 12, 13 rare earths. So
Wow.
they're intrinsic to how we live and how we power our daily lives. Somebody said recently, which is a very good way of describing rare earths, right, was if all the gold disappeared tomorrow, it wouldn't really make much difference. If
Right.
all the rare earths disappeared, we wouldn't have smartphones. They're in all modern technology.
Ah,
We wouldn't
wow.
have electric cars. We wouldn't have solar power. We wouldn't have wind turbines. Planes would fall out of the sky. Rockets that are going into space wouldn't go in. So they're intrinsic to how we live our daily lives. They're in wearable medical devices, aviation, nuclear shields for reactors. Um, Even they're being used now in cancer treatments in their sort of oxide powdered form. So.
Right. Wow.
Mm.
So what you are telling me that if the rare earth is not there, Elon Musk won't be the richest man on the earth because there is no EV car, no solar panel, and no rockets.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. He'd still be in South Africa doing manager
Farming.
of a furniture shop or something.
So, can you describe what these rare earth are? What are they called? Like we know gold, silver, platinum. What are these? Is it lithium? Is it what?
No, it'd be germanium,
Okay.
hafnium, rhenium, praseodymium, neodymium. There's 17 rare earths,
Okay.
and only 10. We only offer 10 as an
Okay.
investment because 7 are not all that rare, despite the name. There
I
can be
see.
found in abundance, and also the sort of demand for some of them is not as great as others. The ones we focus on are the ones that are in all modern technology, and will play a critical part in this transformation to sort of a carbon neutral world. Wind
Yes.
power, solar power, electric cars. So those basically we focus on the ones where demand is increasing, and they're sort of critical, and they're also limited in supply. But yeah, there's about 9 or 10 that are
I
really
see.
intrinsic to our daily lives.
So, full disclosure, I am, as of today, I am going through the evaluation myself, right, and due diligence to buy this from your company, right, because I want to invest in, I believe in rare earth, or kind of started believing in it. And the one thing which you pointed out is the carbon neutral. I want to I want to leave this world in safe hands, in better hands for our kids, our grandkids, and so we got to start focusing on being carbon neutral, how we can help the planet, how we can help the environment. So this is very important. Where are those rare earth uh, can be found in the world right
Okay.
now? Where are
Right.
they found? In which
Right.
country? Which country controls the most?
Sure. Yeah. Look, that's a very, very key question in terms of, investing in rare earths, right? There's a story I'm about to tell you, Alpesh, which is 100% true. People can do their due diligence, they find this out. But I would be confident to say that there's probably no more than about 200 people in all of America now. I'm in Europe, but I know your
Right.
audience is mostly in the US, so I'm not picking on America, but I'm just focusing a bit on the US.
Yes,
There's only about 200 people in the US that really know the story with rare earths, because if more people knew, there'd be more people sort of up in arms or
I see.
investing in them. So I'm going to just take you back in time a little bit first, right? In the 1980s, the US was producing 60% of the world's rare earths, not very
Whoa.
far, not very far from where you are in Mountain Pass in California. At
Wow.
that, at that time, China was producing about, the next after the US was China produced less than 12%, right? Now, fast forward to today, the US, China, sorry, is producing more than 80% of the world's rare earths. They
That's
completely,
unfreaking believable. Whoa.
yeah. And the US, although they're still producing some in Mountain Pass, they still send their raw materials to China to be separated. They have to be
Oh.
separated and they have to be refined. But here's the reason it makes sense as an investment, Alpesh, right? Um, I think what happened, most people would agree, is that China understood probably before Europe and the US that rare earths were going to be the backbone of manufacturing in the 21st century. They realized this in the late 80s. And I know they did because the Chinese premier at the time, Deng Xiaoping, he made a statement. You can Google this, you'll see it in 1987, standing on a mine in China. He said, the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths.
Mm.
It was a very shrewd statement because at the time, the US was the dominant market leader, right? Now,
Right.
what happened next was China legitimately partnered with foreign companies like Mountain Pass in California. In fact, they still have an 8% share. And they legitimately moved all the separation and the refining to China,
Oh
all
my
of it.
God.
So
Wow.
87% of the refining. See, that's what makes them
This is a
expensive.
master stroke.
A a geopolitical strategy
Yes.
30 years in the making that's now coming to fruition. So what happened was the US at the time, the government said, look, you know, sort of extracting and separating and refining these materials, it's a dirty process, it's complicated. Why don't we let China do it cheaply, and they can sell the raw materials then to our manufacturers cheaply? So they sort of allowed China to do it, I think not realizing how big a part they were going to play. Remember, technology and the internet hadn't really kicked off at this stage.
Yes.
So what happened then was the US created an agency. It was called the Bureau of Mines, and its job was to make sure US remained competitive, right? To keep an eye on things, if you will.
Right.
Then what happened was this agency was defunded in 1996, and it only has existed on paper since then.
That's
And so
crazy.
the US lost its sort of competitiveness, Europe as well, and China just
Correct.
basically ran away with the circus in rare earths, you know. So now China's won the war. They dominate the rare earths global market.
That's crazy. So basically, what you're telling me, not only China controls rare earth, but they also control the separation, the entire process end to end. And of course, they have been buying gold as well. So pretty much they are going to be the market leader or the one of the strongest economy in coming years.
Yeah. Well, as you said there, Alpesh, as well, where are they, right? You're absolutely right. Though critically, China does 87% of the refining. Now, there's
Oh,
plenty of
wow.
rare earths in the US. There's rare earths in Australia, Japan, Canada, and the US. In fact, in a very rare occurrence of agreement, both President Trump and President Biden both signed executive orders for America to wean its dependence off China, but the only thing they ever probably agreed on. And the US now, you know, in the Defense Inflation Act, and Europe has the European Rare Metals Act. The US and Europe has woken up to the fact that they cannot just be one country, you know, controlling the supply chain. So they're now making steps to increase production in the US, to maybe open a refining facility. But that's going to, you know, it took 30 years for China to dominate. It'll take another 20, 25 years for the US and Europe to get competitive again. And as you have learned, investors can profit from this geopolitical. We can basically hack China's geopolitical strategy.
Interesting. Right. So, so this is a great explanation and story. Why do you call them as strategic metals?
Good question. Yeah. So, Strategic Metals Invest is the name of my company, and strategic metals is an umbrella term for rare earth metals, Also rare earth elements. Elements are the powdered form, what we call the oxides. And, in the US, I think people are calling them technology metals. Even now, some of them are being called green metals. So it's basically an umbrella term for the rare earths that are intrinsic to how we power and how we live our daily lives.
Got it. And how can investors own strategic metals?
Okay, so we are, and this is fact. I mean, I'll always tell you if this is opinion or fact, but we are the only industry supplier in the world that offers rare earths to private investors. It's a relatively new alternative asset class. We've only been offering this to private investors since 2010, so for 12 years in Europe. So most people in the US have not heard about us. Now, the most important thing about that, Alpesh, is, in fact, this might sound a little bit contradictory, but the most important part of our business is not the investment side that I'm talking about now. The most important part is that we are an industry supplier.
Oh,
85% of our business activities on a daily basis are buying rare earths from producers, mostly in China,
okay.
and then reselling them to an industry buyers. We've got clients in more than 70 different countries.
Nice.
Why is that so important? Because the only end buyer for these products are industry buyers. So you've got to be buying them from somebody who has access to that industry. And that's who we are. We have access to, I suppose, our two guarantees, if you will, our warranty statement to the investor. One is we guarantee you're buying industrial grade, high value assets or raw materials that can be liquidated to the industry or any industry. And the second thing we guarantee is when you're ready to liquidate, we will sell them to an industry buyer for you. So we also provide the exit.
That is such an important point, right? Because this is not like gold, silver, or platinum, where you can just buy it from the street and sell it anywhere in the world without any restrictions, right? This is very important that if you are buying this thing, of course, you can't store it at your home. And then second, you should be able to sell them. So this is great. You mentioned 85% of your activity is with industry. Then why, if you already have buyer and supplier, why offer it to investors? Why go through this?
Good question. Well, I suppose a few reasons, but the first one comes to mind is why not? We're in that unique position that we're an industry supplier, and also investors are interested. Investors are always interested in alternate and a new. We still live in an age where there are new and exciting asset classes being discovered or being created all the time. And as you mentioned, it's the same sort of paradigm as buying gold or silver. It's just another metal. So previously it was sort of closed, mostly just industry buyers. But we have that unique capability that we can guarantee the authenticity of the metals that we're selling, and we can guarantee to liquidate them. So investors like it. And two, I know in America they like to use this term, it's a side hustle.
Yes.
Now, I wouldn't call it a side hustle, but it's a separate, independent income stream. And actually, we get two separate businesses out of it, because we also have a storage facility in Frankfurt. It was a bunker in World War II. Yeah. And we converted it. It's got 2 floors below ground, 1 above. Over 200 metric tons of rare earths are there. It's the largest sort of inventory of rare earths anywhere in the world outside China. So it's a bank level secure vault. It's a tax-free zone. It's just like you're storing in Switzerland or Singapore. So that's a second. So we've 2 separate businesses as a result. Our main business, as a commodities trader. Second business, offering rare earths to private investors. Third business, storage.
Got it. So let me throw you a curveball. Would there be a conflict of interest between your company and investors, like let's say the demand of the rare earth goes through the roof. In that case, would you just stop selling it to investors because you know it's crazy demand in industry? Or second, if the demand goes to the roof and you force, and there is not much supply, and you force investors to sell, saying that, oh, these companies or these industries need rare earth metals right away.
Right. Well, I mean, the first part of the question, demand is increasing, and like one metal, for example, gallium, it's estimated that the demand is somewhere between 6 and 9 times higher than supply,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's not going to change anytime soon. So there's only a finite, available every year as well. But we, as a business, um, we don't really, there wouldn't be any conflict because on the one hand, we're buying rare earths, we sell them to an industry buyer, and then if an investor wants to buy, they own the assets. I mean, they buy them from us, but they own them, and we can't force anybody to sell, and we wouldn't. If somebody wants to sell, we'll make them an offer, and if they accept the offer, we'll buy them. So I suppose the key thing to remember is the prices for the investor is aligned with the industry prices. So it's there's no more advantage to us buying them from a supplier, or if we decide if one of our investors wants to sell, it's exactly the same sort of profit margin for us as well. So prices are going up all the time.
I see. And how can investors profit from this?
Well, the market is driven purely by supply and demand.
Of every market, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's no correlation, or there's no anything other than the pure supply and demand. And I'll give you three scenarios, and there's a precedent for each one, right? Let's say like the safest bet is that you're buying an asset that is in huge demand. I mean, the other thing in the last 6 months, things have really changed again because of Russia invading Ukraine. Europe has now decided to wean its dependence off Russian oil and gas. How are they going to do that? Wind turbines and solar power and electric cars. So we already had this massive global demand because of, for modern technology, aviation industry, and we were already sort of going through this transformation to a greener way to power our lives, and now it's just skyrocketed. Gallium, for example, is up 50% every year the last 5 years. It's already up 40% this year. So that's how you profit. You own an asset where demand is increasing and there's a finite amount being made. Now, the other two examples where we saw prices really, really increase was in 2010, there was a territorial dispute between Japan and China. Mm-hmm. And Japan sort of kidnapped or held hostage a captain of a Chinese fishing trawler.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were fishing in territory, disputed waters.
Yeah, the Japan owned, yeah.
Yeah, in retaliation for that, China restricted the quotas on rare earths. Within the space of a few months, we saw some of them go up 5 times. It was like crypto; they 5x'd in a few months.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, what happened then was Europe, Japan, and the US took, China to the WTO. They won the case, but in the meantime, investors made a lot of money, right? So there's a precedent for China playing what we call the economic rare earth card, right? The other thing, which is actually happening now and why we see great sort of potential over the next 3 to 5 years, the other thing is China has big plans for electric cars, solar power, and wind turbines themselves. And last year we saw shortages, meaning they were exporting less because they needed them for their own supplies. We're going to see more of that. China are threatening, if the trade tensions escalate, or things escalate between maybe Taiwan and the US, they'll do that again. So I think on a very good day, you'll see good, healthy returns. But if China plays the economics card or just sort of restricts quotas for their own needs, you'll also see, prices increasing, which is good for investors.
Right. So let's talk about, because everyone knows about gold and silver. Can you compare gold and silver versus rare earth metals?
Yeah, well, gold is up 7% in 10 years, and our metals are up 34% a year. From an investor point of view, that's all you need to know. I mean, there's something going on. Gold, I think, the perception and the attachment to gold is changing. For example,
it's done, I would say.
Down 20% since March.
And can you believe during inflation, gold should be going up?
Yes.
Almost everything is down. Gold moved with the stock market. So I was like, this is done now. People don't believe in gold.
Yeah. Just purely from an investor point of view, like, as I said, 10 years, but even if you look in the last 5 years, we're up an average, of 34% a year, compared to gold is just, I think, maybe 11% or something in the last 5 years. So the numbers don't lie, and why is that? It's because these metals have an intrinsic value. You know what I think as well, Alpesh? Rare earths weren't available before, and if 20 years ago people had the option of buying gold or buying rare earths, they would at least have bought both,
Right.
And that's why I'm talking to you today is, we're in Europe. We've been 30 years in business as a rare earths trader in Europe. We've been 12 years offering as an asset class. We're expanding the business. We're expanding our storage. And, we want to reach out and talk to people in North America as well to let them know that you can actually do this safely and securely.
That's great. So can we talk about risk? Is this a low risk or high risk investment?
It appears to be high risk, but it's not. It's low risk, and I'll tell you why. One, because you're buying authenticated assets. I mean, they are industrial grade assets, but mostly it's low risk because they have a value. They're in demand. There's always demand for rare earths. If one of our investors wants to liquidate, we'll make them an offer on the same day. If they accept that offer, they'll be paid in 3 to 4 working days. So you don't even need to give 30 days notice. They're highly, highly liquid. And look, I don't think there's anybody in the world would argue that demand for, instead of focusing on the rare earths for a sec, let's focus on the materials that they're in, the applications, right? So all modern technology, smartphones, computers, wearable medical devices, aviation, solar power, wind power, electric cars. Does anybody think those demand in those industries is going to go down? I don't think so.
No.
And in fact, you mentioned Elon Musk. He made a very interesting comment as well about rare earths and other commodities, which is rather than just invest in Apple or in Tesla, have a look at the commodities that they need for their products and invest in them as well. So you're going further down the value chain. And this is exactly what rare earths are. There's 12 rare earths in an iPhone. So you're investing in the raw materials that are needed in everyday life.
Oh, that's very interesting. What can go wrong?
Okay. So with supply and demand, like just to give you an example, you need indium, one of our rare earths, to swipe your phone, right? It's possible that somebody will come with a better technology or a better, metal maybe to swipe your phone, and all of a sudden it won't be as in demand as it was. So in that case, you might see, prices go down. The other thing that could happen, which might happen as well, right, is, as say the US and Australia produce more rare earths, the Chinese could easily sort of, flood the market with one.
Yeah.
They have 50% of the world's
It's like
reserve.
oil market when Saudi Arabia tries to control, right? OPEC will flood
exactly
the
the same.
Yeah.
That's the more likely scenario, because in terms of applications, like they're discovering new applications. We're only at the beginning of the potential for rare earths. Just last week, actually, engineers in in MIT in the US. They've created this technology. It's like a skin. It's made out of rare earths. It's a liquefied form of rare earths. It's a wearable medical device that in real time works as a sort of a monitor, a wireless communicator. It can monitor bodily functions. It can sort of administer painkillers. It can administer many different things.
Wow.
So, there's different applications coming out all the time.
So let's talk about the last question before we move on to the next section. What percentage of your portfolio contains strategic metals?
Good. Well, I started with 5%, and that was in 2017 when I first discovered rare earths. And, the story, if you will, has just been getting better and better. I'm now up to sort of 15, 17%.
Wow.
And my goal is, and this is probably the key thing is, I'm going to stay in till 2035 and beyond, because we're just hitting the perfect storm. Like it's taken 30 years for China to dominate. It's taken 30 years for the West to realize, how did we let this happen? And it's too late. China's already won. They've won the war in rare earths. They already dominate the market, and they are just going. We in the West are pretty much now waiting in line for what China will sell after they've satisfied their own quotas. So there's a very interesting few years ahead.
Oh, this is great. Any advice for beginner investors?
Oh, I think mentors, rather than, obviously, you can, you're curious, you want to learn as much as possible. But I think you can't really put a value on finding someone you can trust to tell you the truth. And there's plenty of good people out there, nowadays with technology. It might be a close friend, it might be a family member, but it might be somebody, just like we're talking here today, people that are sharing, about something you might not have heard before. I think, I don't know if mentor is the right word, but certainly, if you have a good idea or you want to make an investment, talk to at least one or two or three people you trust before you do it.
No, that's a great advice. So I call it as mentors or partners, right?
Yeah.
So this is great. How can my listeners reach out to you?
Good. So the website is Strategic Metals Invest. They can go there directly, or they can email me, Louis, Louis, at strategicmetalsinvest.com, and mention, that they had heard, they'd listened to the podcast and, through Alpesh and Wealth Matters, and we'll take good care of them,
No, thank you so much. Yeah. So if you reach out to Lou, definitely mention, or maybe email me as well, so that I can make the intro. So Lou knows that, you guys came from Wealth Matters, and he will take care of you personally. Thank you so much, Lou, for your time.
Thank you, Alpesh. Good talking to you. Thank you.
Same here.
Thanks for listening to the Wealth Matters podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes so others can enjoy the show too. Have a great week and happy investing!